Blog is dead and RadioTube lives! Or rather, I'm radio play version of reading this story by Melissa Rodee, and it was published by Games Workshop for Psychic Awakening on their website, so I'm sure they own all copyrights and would be very cross if I made a career out of this, but I still wanted to try it, so I'm going to do weird stuff like use separate microphones for separate sections, intentionally perturb the pronunciation, and let's go.
Erbane paused in her labors, her quill poised above the parchment. Outside the dome a quiet had fallen. Within, the Farseer continued his impassioned monologue, while the rest of the gathered dignitaries listened with varying degrees of patience.
This course of action cannot be conscienced. There is too much at risk to wantonly embrace the cult of death. You have all witnessed the peril of this path in the destruction of Biltan,
the Varti seer intoned gravely. Still, despite the gravity of her duty, she found herself distracted. Her mind wandered to what was unfolding beyond the confines of the crystalline dome. The sensation of this troubled her deeply, as it was through unfettered thought and desire that one could so easily fall into depravity and madness. Never before had she been tempted from her path, and the thought of that fate made her scratch the words into her parchment with renewed determination. As she wrote, a chill entered the chamber, and through the opaque crystal wall she saw the sky outside darken. Erbane shivered as if a cold hand had touched her. Something was coming. Although she fought it, she felt compelled to go outside. It was as if another mind was guiding her, another's thoughts divining her actions. The Farseer was still talking, but others in the gathering had noticed the change and were whispering amongst themselves. Erbane let the quill drop from her hand, the rune she was working on, never to be completed. Outside, the screeching of the howling banshees rent the air, followed quickly by the unmistakable sound of clashing blades and painful deaths. Whoops and cries cut through the Farseer's speech, the war cry of those who relish torment and destruction, heralding the approach of something terrible. "Stay inside, Erbane," one of the other rune scribes said, taking her arm. "This is not your path." "I have to go," she said vaguely. She couldn't explain that she was being impelled by a force greater than herself. She shook off her companion and stepped out into the darkness. A whirl of activity played out before her. A kanafkahi of colors, sounds, and smells. Aspect warriors in their bright garments clashed with purple-hued beasts. Lithe figures cut speeding jet bikes from the air with long black talons, and the arcid stench of perfume blossomed across the battlefield as lofty, oiled creatures strode through the melee. The figures fighting in the battle were hazy and nebulous. Erbane could pick out only colors and shapes. It was as if a veil hung between her and the battlefield, preventing her from seeing anything clearly. She looked behind her. The dome, too, seemed to shimmer in and out of existence. Erbane felt that she was at the crossroads of two diverging futures. She could either go back to the world she knew or step forward into something else. Both paths were uncertain, but she felt drawn to the battle that was unfolding before her. Once more, she sensed that history was being written, but now with swords instead of quills, and blood instead of ink. While Erbane struggled to make out any particular details in the scene before her, she saw flashes of color everywhere. The red, black, and purple of the Yanari, the crimson ribbons worn in honor of the god of death, the blazing phoenix side carried aloft on richly decorated banners, and the fleshy pinks and lilacs of the Slanashi demons, the craven hedonites of She Who Thirsts. The Eldari had formed a perimeter to keep the Chaos forces at bay, but the line was buckling, worn down by the relentless daemons who ignored even grievous wounds in their desperation to join the fray. A group of pale-skinned beasts clad in dark leather straps were tearing their way through the battle line at a devastating pace, with pincer claws raised and unnatural shrieks on their lips. As before, Arbane sensed a cruel point in time, a moment where fate pivoted between hope and desolation. Once more she felt the influence of another mind working through her own, guiding her actions. She looked around and saw a dagger on the ground, no longer needed by the ranger who lay lifeless beside it. She picked it up, feeling the weight of it in her hand. In this realm of uncertainty, it seemed the only thing that was real. She took one last look at the dome behind her, then stepped into the whirling tumult. Blades wheeled all around her, and stray laser blasts scorched the air. She could smell burning flesh, the iron tang of blood, and the sickening perfume of the daemons. Here was the madness she had feared would come for her if she abandoned her path. But she knew now that was not going to be her fate. She was driven by a new kind of clarity. She leapt at one of the lilac-skinned creatures that was carving its way through the Yanari line, slashing and stabbing at the squirming form with her dagger. She knew nothing but the desire to protect her kin and the future of her race. As the daemon fell beneath her furious blows, it reached out an ebony claw and cut her throat with a single motion. The cut was so clean, Arbane barely felt it, and her vision faded away. With satisfaction, she watched the creature laying dead beside her. Death claimed her, and she welcomed it, joining countless others. She could hear their thoughts now, and she understood. This had always been her path. Yvraine opened her eyes, the dream still vivid in her mind. It was one of many she had borne witness to of late, and she was sure it would not be the last. All over the galaxy, the path of the Eldari race was being decided by its members, those who chose to cling to the old ways and those who were driven to join her cause. Fate hung in the balance, and its course would be altered by even the smallest of actions. Only one thing was certain. Death would come for them all.
So that was about 1,000 words of fiction, and it turned into a few minutes of, well, radio play, I guess? I don't know what happens next in the story. I don't know how it ties into the Eldar books. I largely grabbed this story at random. I could put forth another 1,000 thoughts on it easily, but that seems indulgent. I think the story could be summarized as a scribe was doing their scribing during a lecture or hearing, and they felt compelled to exit the building and go stab a demon when the demons attacked. I don't know why everyone else was so calm about this. Maybe it happens always to Eldar. I don't know. I feel that this glorious death scene was something Zack Snyder would encourage, but David Wenham's Faramir would say it was a waste. I kind of agree with the later. This character was not really prepared to make a big difference in the battle and just sort of wandered out all hyped up in a stupor to stab something and then died. I don't know what the epilogue is supposed to totally be. I do know that Yvraine is lamenting this character. Well, I think Yvraine is lamenting this character's death, or maybe she's celebrating its contribution to the birth of Ynede. The character of Yvraine is a prophet of Ynede, the elder god of the dead, and I get the impression that Yvraine is not necessarily a zealot or super enthusiastic about the whole situation. I think the Eldar are always written to be reluctant to admit or examine or embrace their emotions. Hey, like Vulcans! and they seem to see the world happening, and they try to guide it towards the fate they most desire, while also remaining passionless, which is of itself contradictory. Afterwards, after reading, it occurred to me that the Farseer may be an attempt to depict the failure of Elder Society to hang on, as if they're dead, let's move on, but the Farseers and company are saying, no, we can hang on as we are. And, okay, but whatever. Either way, this character is another drop in the pool of blood from which Nene will cross from prophecy into existence someday. I feel like the Nene plot, though, is similar to the death of the Emperor. It's a mystery box that would destroy the setting if Games Workshop ever opens it. There won't be something like Warhammer 50k, where Nene has been born, the Emperor has passed on, Vastra has risen, the Orcs are unified, and actual Satan coalesces, and all these other teased events. I think that would break the fun of 40k of waiting for these events. So, those are my thoughts on it after my reading of it. What are your thoughts on it after listening to me read it? And should I do more, less, or any of these ever again? I'm going to do the painting. I'm going to keep painting all these damn minis until I finish them all and can justify a 3D printer. Then I'll start painting Flesh of Gods and reading, I don't know, Lovecraft fiction.